Welcome to this week. We're going to be talking about the comparison and contrast essay. So this is going to be an essay that you are probably going to repeat in many different ways throughout your collegiate career. I'm just going to go over what the comparison and contrast essay will look like, and then we'll talk about the thesis and drafting your paper. So to begin, um, comparing. I know that many of you, all of you know what comparing is. It's just looking for the similarities of things, um, looking for the things that are same between objects. So look at this picture of these jars. They are both glass. They both look like they had lids. They're both clear. So um, those jars, they've got some similarities, but find the uniqueness about them. Maybe one of the jars used to have milk in it, the other one used to have orange juice in it. Find the specific uniqueness that you're that you are going to compare with your items. And what I mean by finding the uniqueness is there's going to be something that's interesting or specific about unique that's not right on the surface. So sure, when you're comparing these jars, one of the easiest things to do would be to say they're both made of glass. I mean, that's great, but look below the surface. Look deep within it. Maybe one is made in Wisconsin and one is made in Florida, and there's different glass blowing techniques made for each one of them. Just look deep below the surface, and sometimes with the subjects that you're comparing, you're going to have to do a little bit of research on things. When you are comparing and you're writing a paper about it, it's going to be easiest to write something that where the items or subjects you're comparing are going to have many similarities. So when you are writing, look for something that has a lot of similarities when you're comparing something. And don't stretch your writing. Don't look for the things like, for the instance, these two jars, one might have 3 rings and one might have 2 rings. Like that sure, those are items to compare, but that's a bit of a stretch. That's just that's over comparing the items. So on the opposite side of the comparison is a contrast. And excuse me, contrasting is sort of the opposite of comparison, or it is the opposite of comparison because instead of looking for similarities, you're looking for differences. And as before, you want to find unique differences. So if you look at these forks and the spoon, there's obviously the difference because one is a spoon and the others are forks. But then the unique differences here is the spoon has eyeballs. That's definitely a unique difference. Maybe the spoon is made out of a different type of stainless steel than the forks or something. That just look for the specific unique differences. And then again, look deep into the subject. Do your research. Find the details that are going to really sell your writing. And also look at the things that have many differences. You don't want to just have things that are going to be like those glass bottles. That basically the difference between those two glass bottles was one was small and one was large. That's not enough to write about. And again, don't overstate with your subject. Don't try to dig and dig and dig when you only have surface writing and you only have surface contrasts. Just if you feel as you're writing and your contrast or your comparisons even don't have a lot of things that you can compare or contrast, then I would say you need to find a different subject to write about. So when you're writing your comparison and your contrast paper, think about it as you're going to have 2 separate topics. So this would be topic A, topic B, but in the middle, this is Venn diagram, you've seen it before, in the middle, is where the comparison and the contrast paper writing happens. There's things that are going to be dissimilar between them, but then there's things that are going to be definitely right there in the middle with the comparison of the two. So think of these ends here as the contrast, and right here is the comparison. So the big thing when people talk about comparison and contrast writing is they always say, don't try to compare apples and oranges. But I think that those are great things to write a comparison and contrast paper about, because they have many similarities and many differences. And when you are writing these things, many of the subjects that you're working on should have many contrasts and comparisons of each item. So you want to look for the variety, and as I said, look for the apples and oranges. So an apple is a fruit that is typically cultivated in colder climates, and oranges are typically cultivated in cooler climates. An apple, you can eat the skin. An orange, you can still eat the skin, but it's very bitter typically. Oranges come in one color, orange. Apples come in a variety of colors. You could talk about the different types of the meat of the fruit, where the seeds are located, how long it takes to grow, what the cultivation period is, all of these different things. So when you're doing the comparison and contrast writing, you want to look for things that are like that, where there is a wide variety of things to write about. So definitely look for variety. And as you're writing your comparison and contrast, look for and focus on one or two of your comparison or your contrast in one single paragraph. Don't mix them. Do a comparison paragraph and a contrast paragraph. Don't do a comparison and contrast paragraph together. Try not to mix your C's. Don't mix the comparison and contrast in a single paragraph. As you are writing, you'll find that you might feel like you want to, like you're going to want to flip the coin instantly or right away. But I suggest that you keep your comparison to paragraph and contrast to paragraph, and then at the end you can wrap it up and you can say how they are compared and contrasted. So this is going to be more of a general discussion on writing a thesis than a comparison and contrast thesis, but we will talk a little bit about it. So with a thesis, the thesis is your topic sentence, but it's really more than just a topic sentence. It is a topic sentence to the entire paper. It contains the controlling ideas of the paper or the essay. And the strong thesis lays out your topic and states what you're going to say. It is what your paper is going to be about in a single sentence. That's what you should try for. Is if you can't have your thesis written in one sentence, at most two sentences, then your thesis is probably too broad. And one of my suggestions when you're writing a thesis is try not to say this paper will be about, because that's weak writing, honestly. Just when you are writing your thesis, state things factually. So there are many similarities between apples and oranges. One of the similarities is that they're both fruit. A difference is that one is a citrus, and I don't even know what an apple is, but I know it's not a citrus fruit. So that would be more of a thesis than this paper will be about the differences between apples and oranges. I do not want your thesis to state that. That's a bit of a weak thesis. Um, so a thesis can also have points in your thesis statement. So let's say that you're writing about a favorite band. So your favorite band, if you can break it down into like three items. You like the drummer, the bassist, and the lead guitarist. So my favorite band is A because their drummer is the best around, the lead guitarist knows how to lead, and the bassist keeps the music beating with good rhythm or something like that. I'm obviously not a music person, so I'm maybe a little bit out of my element. But anyway, it has 3 points. And as you break it out into those 3 points, you would then focus on one point per paragraph. So one paragraph would be about the bassist, one paragraph would be about the drummer, and one paragraph would be about the lead guitarist. And with your thesis, you should make sure that it is provable with research and proven through the writing. So if you are talking about the lead guitarist, make sure that that paragraph has been researched about the lead guitarist and it is provable through your writing. You shouldn't be at the end of the paper and your readers still wonder if this thesis have been proven or has been proven. And then finally, with writing a thesis, there is typically a location that it is found, and it's typically in the last sentence of your introduction paragraph. So let me restate this. Your thesis is not an entire paragraph. Your thesis is one sentence at least, 2 sentences at most. And I would, because of the length of these papers, I would suggest that you still try for 1 sentence for your thesis and put it at the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. So, as you are working on your paper, you're going to be drafting it now. You're going to write your first draft, second draft, whatever. So my suggestion, as you are drafting your paper, is that you start with your thesis. You start with a strong thesis, and that could be the 3 pieces of the information that you want to compare and contrast in your paper. It could be anything, but start with your thesis and then brainstorm. Just write out as many possible ideas about your comparison and contrast as possible, and then collect any necessary research. Make sure that you're staying on your topic. You are following the topic completely, and as you're brainstorming, you might find that you are actually writing about a different topic, and so that might be time that you're going to want to refocus what you're writing and write on something that you are more comfortable with. But make sure that you are collecting your necessary research, because the research will really help your paper be as strong as it necessarily needs to be. And I'm sure that you've heard of the 5-paragraph structure. So as you have found your thesis and you've begun your drafting, think about your writing as beginning, or at least aiming for the 5-paragraph structure. I'm not saying that this is the direction you need to be going, because your thesis might not support the 5-paragraph structure, but let's just take a look at it. So your first paragraph should be a single paragraph that encompasses your introduction and your thesis in there. Your thesis needs to come early in your paper, because the thesis is the foundation upon which you are building the rest of your paper. and then your transition into your first supporting paragraph. That'll be your first third of your thesis that you're going to be talking about. And then the you will then transition, meaning you will draw a connection between your first and second supporting paragraphs by having a connecting sentence or connecting idea or something. Don't just jump into your second supporting paragraph without indicating that you are moving from the first to the second. And I would suggest staying away from first, this is one piece of information. Second, this is another piece of information. And finally, third, this is another piece of information. So break it into those three supporting paragraphs and then your conclusion. And your conclusion should be a paragraph, a single paragraph that wraps up showing how you've proven your thesis. Here's the main points from each of my supporting paragraphs, and this is how I have proven my thesis. And just like you don't say, this my paper will be about with your thesis, with your conclusion, I highly suggest against starting off with in conclusion. Let your text do the concluding. Think about an essay that you've read or an article that you have read, and think about how smoothly it flows between paragraph to paragraph. Have they ever said at the last paragraph, in conclusion, here are the topics that I talked about? No. The end of a paper, or not a paper, the end of an essay or an article typically will just seamlessly go into your conclusion, and it will show how they've proven they're making their final points. And also, I just thought about this, so I'm sorry for the bit of a tag on here, but with your conclusion, make sure your conclusion does not hold any new information. So let's go back one step here. When you're drafting and you're brainstorming and you're collecting the necessary research, take all the things that you have brainstormed and collected and place them into each area. So after you brainstorm and you say, oh, I've got a lot of comparisons here, and I've got a lot of contrast here, and I've got things that are similar or different between them, and they'll go right here. So pepper the information throughout as you are looking at the structure of your paper.